So moved.
Second that.
All right, thank you for first and second on that. All in favor? Oh, excuse me.
There seems to be some people missing from the members present and members absent.
From the meeting minutes from the 25th.
Fact sheet. But with 4 people that are not listed somewhere.
Yeah, I was gonna say, can you provide the names of those that were not?
Herman Lopez, Ramon Valadez, and Gerald David. I don't know if they're still members or not, but they should be listed as absent or present.
All right, with that correction, are there any other? From the committee, are there any other corrections or amendments to that? With those additions, can I get a motion or not a motion? Can I get all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, hearing none, motion carries. All right. Moving on to the RTA plan implementation update. James Toe and Rick Ellis, you guys want to take the lead on that?
Basically, so at the last meeting, I forgot to turn on my mic then too as well. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, at the last meeting, you'd asked for a update on where we're at with the current RTA plan. So we wanted to, and you've heard James and I give this similar type of presentation before. In the interest of time, and because the RTA Next is going to be the focus of the presentation and today's meeting on that, we'll briefly cover some of the items and highlight financial as well as project status, can answer any questions, and then allow the bulk of the time then for the RTA Next element that you had asked for. So James, I'll have you go first if you don't mind and kind of highlight some of the handouts that have been presented and walk through any key items you wish to highlight.
All right, thank you, Rick. Mr. Chair, members of CART. Issa, could you put up the financial overview? There you go, yes. Great, thanks. So I'll be providing a brief overview of where we were in the summer. Back in July, we presented this financial overview to TMC. This includes the original Eller forecast with actual collections and expenditures, which inform our current and projected fund balance. The forecast you see listed are shown in constant 2006 dollars, with the target being the medium inflation or baseline, which was included in the original RTA ballot. Using the baseline forecast, we project about $350 million to be about $350 million short of the original anticipated excise tax collections over the 20-year period. In an effort to plug this anticipated gap back in 2014, the PAG Regional Council authorized the use of regional HERF dollars beginning in 2020. So if we combine expenditures to date and programming through fiscal 29, almost $300 million in HERF and $135 million in STBG will be used by RTA projects in the current program. Although we are projecting a total fund balance of more than $400 million, well over $200 million are pledged to projects, while the remaining unencumbered fund balance shown here is required to complete those RTA 1 projects. The next sheet in your packet, titled Resources and Expenditures through 2036, thanks, was intended to show what would be required to complete current RTA projects if excise tax collection concluded with fiscal 26. With no new excise tax revenues, remaining RTA projects would have been underfunded by over $550 million. The lower half shows potential resources to close the funding gap, which combine previously restricted revenues, available interest from excise tax fund balances, and unexpended but encumbered STBG and HERF in the current TIP. Really, the only path to complete current RTA projects without excise tax collections would have been to continue routing all regional HERF and STBG dollars to the remaining RTA projects for the next decade. Without a new 20-year program, it was difficult to see a way forward for transit services supported by the RTA. Without a new voter-approved plan, those services would lose funding after June 30th of next year. Although this path eventually provided funding sufficient to complete the remaining RTA projects, it required a decade's worth of regional dollars and provided no path forward for our transit services. So I'm happy to answer any questions or clarify. And Rick, let's hand it back to you.
Okay, thanks, James. Any questions on the financial aspect before we kind of dive into just a quick, simple summary of the project and transit activities?
Just want to clarify what the 40 million RTA next overlap reduction.
So at the time that was, yes, at the time that was anticipated to be the break in revenues at the end of fiscal 26, and those revenues would have to be included in RTA next. So the final number was actually smaller than that, but that's where the 40 million came in.
Okay. Isa, if you could bring up the next one, which would be the transit breakout, the single page summary. Actually, go ahead and go to the other one. I'm going to skip it and rearrange this one if you would. This was, and you heard James talk about that, one of the key caveats that had to be accounted for. So it's going to be this one-page summary showing transit expenditures. It just says titled up at the top RTA expenses, but this is associated with our transit services that were provided here. We heard James talk about that after June 30, 2026, essentially that activity would need to find alternate funding sources. So this is something we had prepared once again earlier this summer to kind of give an idea of what exactly those transit breakouts are. So the there's a real word for you. Left side column highlights the jurisdiction. Then also the fixed route, dial-a-ride, allocations that go in through there, the paratransit combined, and then the MOE fare credit that we get as a contribution from the jurisdiction. So you kind of see what goes out the door, what gets offset by the local jurisdictions, and then what the net amount is. So both of those, though, are tied to that June 30 timeframe. So out of roughly $100 million plus or minus for the entire transit allocation, roughly about 30 of it is controlled by that. So that's why it was essential that we needed something else that was going to take place and go into effect to prevent that loss of service. The next sheet to highlight with you is the main roadway projects. This is a simple summary that we put together over the summer that basically highlights what's been completed to date, as you can show with 100% in green up towards the top. So this does go in order of completion, kind of from the if it's been completed and done up at the top all the way down to yet to start towards the bottom on the second page. Some key highlights in here is we have several rig roadway corridors that are fully complete, as well as a high number of these that are actively underway as we speak. So that's why we separated those out. As we talked about in past meetings, several of these bigger corridors were identified to be split into segments or phases for ease of implementation, urgency of delivery, addressing key critical areas first, things like that. So this captures all that and shows where we stand with several of the active projects as well as those that have been finished. You go to the second page, you'll note that several of these now are in the more orange or yellow color. That indicates that we've got initial activities that have either been started on that, or the procurement activities are coming, or that some of the solicitation efforts are going to be forthcoming on this as well. So it's meant to be kind of a simple summary of where we stand. It was effective as of this summer. So several of these have now gotten a little further in progress. Maybe they've reached a 75% milestone or a 90% milestone, whereas this summer we're reporting a 50%. So we are making good progress. We are continuing ongoing efforts. Several projects have moved into the next phase over the last several months as well. So that's a continuing ongoing commitment to deliver on all of these projects as well. And with that, we can answer any questions regarding the project implementation, delivery activities, anything else you want to see included. Ruth.
It mentioned numerous times that if the RTA next doesn't have, there will be a loss of $30 million per year for transit. But it looks to me more like it's 21 million.
So you're correct in the 21 million is the RTA funds, and I'm hoping I'm clarifying this correctly, that the extra 10 that is tied to that activity. So that's a commitment that goes hand in hand with the RTA fund. That's why it's a net loss of 30.
Oh, but it could be generated and used for transit.
In theory, yes, but there's no impetus or there's no requirement for it.
There's transit service to pay for. So that money could be used to pay for.
Jurisdictions would need to have that discussion as to where those alternate sources would come from.
So if I may briefly, Rick, so
Please do.
that federal funding that you're talking about is the gap. That's what's missing. And without the RTA, that federal funding would no longer be available. So that's the $9 or $10 million that's missing.
The MOE fare credit?
So if you look at if I don't have the budget here, but those funding sources are federal dollars. And those are based on the RTA existing. So without the RTA, then we would no longer be eligible for those federal dollars. And I can provide you the detail in the budget, but I don't have that with me at the moment.
Okay, but there's still federal dollars that could be reapplied for.
Well, as I understand it, though, they can be applied for with a funding source in place at the local level, and that would not exist. So that funding source from the federal side would no longer be available.
Okay.
I think that's the key takeaway, is that other source options and other gyrations would have to be gone through on that, much as James is describing. So without the RTA excise tax and that impetus, essentially we have to find other sources or make drastic cuts, and you'll hear a little bit more about that during Mel's presentation.
If I may, so Rick
Please
and
go ahead.
James, is it kind of like a match where you have to have the local money first and then go to the federal for a match, something similar to that? Am I understanding that somewhat correctly?
Granted, it's not my area of expertise. I was hesitated to call it a match, but the eligibility, let's put it that way.
All right, thank you. Yes.
If I may add to that, Mr. Chair, typically if the RTA funds are used for FTA, Federal Transit Administration funds, there's typically a 20% match associated with that. But if you do look at the breakdown here, it does show the fixed route on the second column after the jurisdiction, plus the paratransit for a total of just under 32 million, minus any leveraging for FTA funds.
So to break the fixed route down, do you know how much of that is the express routes and the shuttles?
Do not have, I'm sorry, Dan, do you have it? I don't. No,
No.
we'd have to follow up with you on that. One item that's not included in here, just to make note of it, we've talked about it in the past when we've given other updates and presentations. And as you know, basically the categorical funding for bike, ped facilities, sidewalks, things like that, those were on a highly restricted uses available and were allocated. So we do still continue to work with the jurisdictions on those particular projects, particularly through what we call our RTAG, or I think it's Regional Transportation Alternative Grant Project, which is a federal source. So we get an annual allocation and then we provide the match funds for that. So we're able to augment and keep investing in that, albeit on a smaller scale, but we do have those activities going on. And many of the projects that have been underway are nearing completion or are heading for construction as we speak, as well as previous allocations that have been made for those projects as well. So they're on a much smaller scale. We've tried to keep that going where possible, where opportunities align, and where we're able to continue to make that investment. So that's just a simple summary on that, but it's on much less scale.
All right.
Any further?
Yeah, do we have any further questions on that? All right, hearing none, let's move on. Moving on to RTA next. Melanie Lawson.
Yes, thank you. So we have our RTA Next presentation today. This is the presentation. Some of you may have seen it before. If you've attended any of our public meetings or other outreach events, it is the presentation that we provide to the public. So some of you may be very familiar with the information, but we're presenting it to you so that you know what our message is out there to the public. And if you don't mind, we'll just hold all questions till the end and we'll have plenty of time to go back. So we start by providing an overview of what the RTA is, reminding everybody that we're not a county government, we're not the city government, but we're a taxing district that currently collects about $125 million annually across Pima County. And that the original 2006 voter-approved plan and half-cent sales tax to fund that plan are coming to an end. The tax collection would expire in June of 2026. We are governed by the RTA board, which is made up of the jurisdictions that you see here on screen, with each jurisdiction having one seat and one vote on the board. We remind everybody about the benefits of the RTA transportation investments. Everything that you see on screen has been brought to the region in part by the RTA. So it's everything from road improvements to bicycle lanes, traffic signal improvements, multi-use paths, sidewalks, the Sun Van, Sun Shuttle services, the bus system, the Sunlink streetcar, all brought to you over the last 20 years in partnership with the RTA. How the RTA Next will work for you is carry those improvements over for the next 20 years to continue to help people to get to work on time, help students and teachers reach school safely, keeping people connected to life-saving care through services like Dial-A-Ride or some of the other paratransit services, which bring people who have no other means of transportation to a dialysis appointment or other medical appointment, provides more and accessible transportation choices, keeping people in outlying areas, as I just mentioned, connected to everyday essential services, groceries, medical appointments, other shopping needs. So from job centers to medical facilities, RTA Next will help keep us moving faster, safer, and more affordably. And here's where we talk about the funding of the RTA. So as we were just discussing, the federal and state sources are listed on there as well, but the RTA is a significant funding portion for the region for transportation improvements. It's about 2/3 of the regional funding. It's that gray area up on the top. Last fiscal year it provided $126 million, and the state and federal sources combined are just over $50 million. So to help put it in perspective, we ask people to think about their own budget, and if you lost 2/3 of your funding overnight, there would need to be some tough decisions that would need to be made, and you'd really have to decide what the priorities are. And the same would occur for the regions. The roads don't necessarily break overnight, but as we were discussing transit services, something like that would need immediate help from jurisdictions to try to identify a funding source and if they wanted to see those services continue.
State funding starts. But it'd be correct to assume that's basically HERF distributed amongst all jurisdictions under RTA.
Yes, a lot of that is. And as HERF, some of the funding sources haven't increased over the last 30 years, vehicles are becoming more fuel efficient, which is great for air quality, and it helps us all save money at the pump. But it just means that there's not that funding source coming in for the region to help with those transportation improvements. Another benefit of the RTA is that it's funded by a 1/2-cent sales tax as opposed to a property tax. So by having it be a sales tax, everyone who's using the roads is helping to pay for the roads. The tax is assessed in 5 major categories listed here on screen. So people who are on a road trip that stop at a restaurant, any snowbirds that are just maybe part-time residents, we're able to collect some sales tax from them to help pay for the roads. If it were a property tax, the burden would fall on property owners and business owners. It's important to note also that grocery and pharmaceutical items are tax exempt. So those are essential services that aren't taxed except for in South Tucson for groceries. One of our key points that we're trying to remind the public is that RTA Next is not a tax increase. We're currently paying a 1/2 cent across Pima County, and the rate would stay the same with RTA Next. There would also be no period of overlap. There wouldn't be any overlap between the old collection and the new collection. The current collection would stop and the new collection would start. So we're currently paying that 1/2 cent on a $2 pack of gum or $2 cup of coffee, you're paying a penny. And that rate would continue for the next 20 years. So it's at no additional cost to Pima County residents or visitors. So the RTA Next plan elements are listed here on the screen. Copies of the plan are available on our website as well. The first element listed are the roadway corridors. The very first 7 projects listed are the projects that were carried over from the 2006 RTA. They either had a funding revision or a scope revision and are going back to voters for reauthorization or approval. And then there are 31 new roadway corridor projects, not brand new road construction, but they're listed as new projects because they're separate from that 2006 RTA. It's also important to note that within each roadway element, there are bicycle safety or bicycle sidewalk and drainage improvements often listed. So those components are included as part of the roadway project as well. That's been a question we've been getting from the public. The next element is safety, ADA, and active transportation. The next one is the new element, arterial and collector roads. the pavement rehabilitation for arterial and collector roads. This was in response to public feedback that we received during our public outreach last year and our survey that was open. Then there's environmental and the wildlife linkages, which are beneficial not just for wildlife and migration patterns, but also to help keep people safe on the roads. If you have a collision at night with a javelina or something else, it can cause, personal injury or damage to your vehicle. So they're beneficial for safety as well. And then transit, which includes the paratransit services. So we're reminding the public that the transit element includes not just the bus system, but the dial-a-ride, the public dial-a-ride, ADA dial-a-ride, and the paratransit services that are a true lifeline for a lot of people in this community. So as I mentioned earlier, the pavement rehabilitation for arterial and collector roads was made in direct result from public feedback. And we heard a lot about pavement condition across Pima County. And so this element will help to address that. Potholes are still going to be fixed by local jurisdictions. But having this element allows the reconstruction, basically curb to curb of some of those roads so that the jurisdictions can focus on those neighborhood streets and those potholes. Also, it's been raised at a couple communities where we've been, if it's a newer community that maybe doesn't need a lot of arterial collector road pavement rehabilitation right now, what's the benefit? And even though your community might not need it now, this is a 20-year plan. So over the next 20 years, this funding will be available for those communities. So this is a visual of the region's network. This is the base map showing the pre-2006 RTA roadways. The green are the 2006 RTA projects, and the blue are the RTA Next projects. The ones that are circled in blue are the projects that have been carried over into RTA Next. And then the blue dashed line is the Sonoran Corridor study. We're just differentiating it on the map so that it's not road construction, it's just the study portion for the Sonoran Corridor. So we like to remind people visually how the region has benefited over the last 20 years, but then also how the RTA Next projects build on to the 2006 RTA to create a cohesive network. We just map the roadway projects. There are maps online of the bicycle and pedestrian improvements and the other element improvements as well. We just have the roadway ones here. So there was also an economic study that was commissioned looking at the successes of the 2006 RTA. More than 1,000 plan improvements were completed, and the RTA directly invested $1.6 billion into the region. From that $1.6 billion investment, there was more than $3 billion in public and private investments total. So some examples, thinking about the Twin Peaks interchange or the Houghton Road improvements, where investing in the transportation infrastructure brought a lot of other commercial development to the area, car dealerships, Home Depot, grocery centers, all of that economic activity are some of the examples of that $3 billion in public-private investment. There were also 40,000 permanent jobs that were created, not construction jobs. These are permanent jobs from some of that additional commercial or other investment that I just mentioned. And we could expect that to continue with RTA Next. So if conditions remain the same, we could anticipate about 40,000 additional jobs over the next 20 years and $3.7 billion in total economic investment from the same type of activity, the commercial development or other investment along those transportation improvement corridors. Without RTA Next, things could look a little different. The economic study looked at a no RTA scenario, and there could be 54,000 jobs lost and 3.5 billion lost in economic loss as companies look to other areas with maybe better transportation infrastructure, or site selectors look at other cities or areas that have better transportation infrastructure. And we're not trying to paint a too dismal picture for the region. We just want everyone to understand that the status quo is the continuation of RTA. Without RTA, there would be a service reduction. So without RTA investment, everyday life could be affected. As we discussed, transit riders would see a major cut in services and would be the first to be impacted if that funding source were turned off. The roads don't necessarily break overnight, but that funding source for transit would end in June. And patients could lose access to life-saving care with the dial-a-ride or other service reductions. Traffic congestion would get worse, commute times would increase, and the vulnerable and outlying communities could be left behind. So why should you count on the RTA? One of the things that we like to mention is, there's been questions about the 2006 RTA and the funding that didn't come in as anticipated. So we've all felt the effects of the economic recession that happened over the last 20 years. Things got more expensive, and then the population didn't grow as anticipated, which led to some less collections than we thought. But the RTA board has learned and adopted a more conservative revenue target for this next RTA plan with a higher probability of success. So everything on the RTA Next plan should be able to be completed. And there's also line items for how potential additional revenue could even be spent if it comes in. But we are using that more conservative estimate. The RTA has also demonstrated proven financial accountability and project delivery with audits every 5 years from the State Auditor General, which we've passed and the reports are available online. The RTA also had 6 years of public input for development of this plan, and the public will continue to help shape transportation priorities. The safety and some of those other categorical elements will have a public process associated with them as well over the next 20 years. And then voters have the final say. A benefit of the RTA funds is that they're collected locally and managed locally. They don't come from a state or federal source. We control it here. And voters have the final say in that projects have to be delivered as they're approved by voters in the plan. If there is a substantial change, then we need to go back to voters for reauthorization, as we're doing with these 7 projects that are included in RTA Next. So no matter your destination, whether you walk, bike, roll, take the bus, however you get from A to B, there should be something in the plan for you and something that you can get behind. And it's truly a regional plan that's across Pima County. And I know a lot of us don't just stay in one jurisdiction, whether you work, live, drive kids to soccer, or wherever you need to go. It's getting you from A to B all across Pima County. So I covered that pretty quickly, but I wanted to make sure we have enough time for questions.
Thank you, Melanie. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, on the finance things, if we don't have the plan, should I be adding those 2 numbers up? Or is it just one or the other?
Adding. So if there were no RTA Next plan, then
Yeah, so is it 48,000 plus 54,000, 100,
oh,
100, or is that the whole thing?
yeah. So 54,000 would be the estimated job loss over the next 20 years.
So I don't add the 54 and the 45.
No, just 54,000 lost.
And the other question, I know Pima County is very big and hard to put on the map. All the projects seem to be in Greater Tucson. Is there anything outside of Greater Tucson?
There's quite a bit outside of Greater Tucson. Let me go back to the map here. Yeah, so you can see the shaded gray areas are the different jurisdictions. So there's quite, looking to the north, there's projects in Marana and Oro Valley. Looking to the south, there's unincorporated areas of Green Valley. There's Sahuarita off to the east, unincorporated area of Vale with Marion, Cleveland, and Colossal Cave. So,
Yeah, but I'm considering that Greater Tucson, the metropolitan area. Pima County is enormous. Is there anything outside? I mean, we're collecting the tax from everyone in the county, correct?
Mhm.
So like Ajo, not the street, the town.
yeah.
Correct. So these are just the roadway line item projects. So the categorical ones then could be greater distribution wherever the needs are. You can have wildlife linkage money that's out on the various tribal lands or out in the outlying areas. So all that's eligible. We've only showcased and highlighted where the main priority projects are for the roadway corridor only. So yes, any of those categorical items, and we do utilize those today.
And for the Ajo community, the Dial-A-Ride I know is very
Mhm.
well used out there. And then the Ajo to Tucson bus route is very popular as well. And that's an RTA provided service also.
But do we promote that so people know it? You know, if I'm in Ajo, why am I gonna vote for another half cent?
Yeah, so we,
And I'm not advocating going to Ajo and having a meeting.
but we have.
Not us.
No, so, yeah, so when we do, we have gone to Ajo, or when we do provide some specific information for the area that we're visiting, so they know exactly what is in their backyard that they'll benefit from, but then do remind everybody that, we all benefit from the regional plan. Yep.
Cautionary type of statement, and I don't know if I can phrase it properly, but I noticed, well, my basic point is we don't want to someplace I noticed the term "no more tax increases" should RTA next pass. What I'm thinking about is the state legislature. If they get the message and misinterpret it or whatever, we wouldn't want to take them off the hook on any future gas tax increases contributing to HERP that they may make. And I'm not sure what the remedy would be, but I guess just a cautionary, we need to be pretty careful how we phrase no tax increase where it doesn't relieve the state of Arizona from its participation in Pima County's future, which they're inclined to do.
Right. No, so we do try to be clear, and I apologize if I wasn't here, that RTA Next is not a tax increase. So yes, it's very specific.
That should be specified maybe more dramatically.
We can do that. So yeah, the half cent is a half cent currently with RTA, and it would be a half cent with RTA Next. Yeah.
Melanie, question. There's cost estimates obviously for all these projects. Is there going to be any kind of contingency fund that can be used for projects that whenever you're digging, a lot of times you find stuff that you haven't anticipated and things like that. Is there going to be any kind of contingency so these funds could draw upon, or these projects could draw upon additional funds should they need them?
There's not a contingency fund dedicated for it, but the contingency allocation was factored into each of the individual cost estimates. So all the big roadway items, as we went through our cost estimating exercise and detailed look at all that, we took a look at the complexity, what's involved, where the knowns and the unknowns are, and we factored that in so that each one of those respective costs then had some sort of contingency aspect built in.
And also the timing, if projects are earlier in the plan, they don't need to be escalated up as high, obviously, because you're not going to have 15 years of inflation on a project that's 3 years in. Was that also calculated?
So we normalized everything to the current 2026 dollars, but as we go forward, we will be factoring in inflationary aspects as well for both the revenue and the cost.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I want to add a cautionary note about the economic loss, because there could be some naysayers out there that say, well, I'm going to have more money in my pocket and I'm going to invest that money in the community. And so I don't know whether, that's something you need to be able to respond to. I get it. I support it. But I think a naysayer might say, well, that $120 million is going to be invested back in the community for whatever purpose they wish to do it. So just be careful with that.
Thank you. Wendell?
One final question. How closely coordinate correlated, I can't even say that word. How close does the increase in revenue match the increase in the expenses of the projects? I mean, are they, obviously, the revenue will go up because people pay more. So, so half cent is more.
You want to take a crack at that, James?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So actually, the financial overview sheet, it does show a national construction cost index. It tracks pretty well with inflation if you take away these outliers, which are big outliers. I mean, there are significant events like the Great Recession or the pandemic. We hope it's unlikely we would have two events like that in the next 20 years. But if you remove those years, it does track closely with inflation. So I think we could just use basically a CPI.
Well, and I commend you, 20 years is a long way to forecast out.
Sure. Yeah.
One of the, so
Yep.
I have a couple of questions.
You go ahead.
I think you can hear me. So one of the questions that you had on there, 125 million annually on the graph chart. Is that an average over the last 20 years, or is that this last year's dollar amount?
That was this last year, fiscal 25. Issa, my clicker stopped working. Do you mind going back to that slide? Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so I was wondering about that. And then these next few questions, I'm sure I could be answered if I had looked online at your plan, but since I haven't and you're all here, I'm gonna ask. So you talked about the ones that are not being done, the last ones, the last projects that weren't part 26, they're gonna be part of 20 of the next RTA next. And some of them had scope changes.
Yes.
Is it clearly stated in the plan what the change was from the previous to the new one?
Yes, it is. So I'm going to read to it from here because I happen to have a copy. So the header up at the top of it on the project modification says scope changes from the 06 plan or the remaining phases were recommended and due to changes in traffic modeling, growth projections, or additional money needed. So for instance, first one is Silver Bell, widened to a 4-lane divided roadway with bike and ped and associated drainage improvements. Previously adopted scope was 3 and 4-lane Desert Parkway. So we have that comparison between the proposed new scope and what was originally called out within the overlapping reason of kind of the umbrella that this was driven either by financial or necessity and traffic change patterns. Does that answer your question?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
thank you. And then back to something Wendell mentioned. So you said we have an item for rehabbing or asphalt improvement in there?
Yep, pavement rehabilitation.
Is that only going to be for RTA roads previously built? Or can somebody in Ajo who has a bad road that's been never, ever, ever touched, can that money be used to Ajo or Catalina or something like that for a road that has never had RTA money before?
We're not going to fix your road.
Well, that answered that question.
Yeah, I was going to say, I know where you were going with it. It specifies arterial and collector roads. So those are region eligible. So
Okay, they don't
throughout,
have to be an RTA road that
they
was.
do not have to be a previous RTA project as long as they meet the arterial or collector definition in terms of its functional use. But it doesn't have to be a previous RTA project for its use.
Okay, that's good to know. And
What's the percentage?
The
The
percentage.
percentage is going to rehab versus new builds.
Oh,
You could just make something up and we'd all believe you.
Isn't it a third?
57.
Yeah.
no.
there you go.
So the amount allocated is 177 million across a $2.67 billion plan. Math I can't do in my head.
7%.
Thank you. I'll take your word for it. So,
Oh, what? Like 17.
0.67 and gets to 178.
Yeah.
It's in the ballot language, actually.
Yeah, we did break it out in the
We
ballot
have it.
language in the publicity pamphlet. You just hit it when, and I haven't memorized that part of it, so. You hit the one question I usually don't ask.
And then just my last question. So as we talk about the long 20 years and we all saw the recession and things got stopped or whatever, does this new plan actually have a plan of attack should that happen again? Is there going to be a relook of projects? Should the money fund it? Is that built in so that we don't have to go through the effort of waiting to go back to another vote in the middle of the 20 years?
Yeah, so by adopting that more conservative revenue target, that's sort of the best way to prevent that from happening again, so that there's the higher chance of success for collecting everything and being able to implement everything as budgeted in the plan.
And on top of that, we added, there's a note on the draft plan, it would be included as well. It's under the heading of plan revisions. In the event of unforeseen circumstances beyond the control of the RTA board, including insufficient funds available to complete everything within the plan, the board at their discretion may rescope, reschedule, or programs use available RTA funding deemed by the board to be most necessary. So I think we looked at that too. We didn't come up with scenarios based on every situation, but introduced the flexibility to be responsive to when that scenario does pop up, whatever that would be, then we have capabilities of doing with that, which would include the possibility of going back to voters if that's deemed appropriate as well. So we wanted to keep that in there and allow that opportunity to respond as needed.
Thank you.
Does that include adding things if we come to year 19 and we paid for everything because we have extra revenue?
Yeah, so there's the potential additional revenue within each element too that looks at that. And then beyond that, hopefully that would be a good problem to have.
Yeah.
But step one is listing the potential revenue for each element.
It's still contained with the plan. So the only thing I want to add to what Mel said is, unless we go back to voters and add new projects, new elements, or new aspects on that. So we can go up, we can increase our revenue. We had the foresight to think ahead on that. But in that aspect of it, it still is confined within the plan approved elements, unless we go back to voters. So all those are options on the table, should that materialize as well.
All right, yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the CART, Jamie Brown with PAG RTA staff. Just want to add to the commentary about the situation that might occur potentially, what we saw with RTA 1 in terms of the revenue shortfall. So we've been working with the Technical Management Committee Policy Subcommittee on how we're going to be tracking financial performance measures and reporting out on at least an annual basis, probably more frequently. So we want to have a very comprehensive annual report that'll talk about how revenues are performing, for example, as compared to the constant 2026 dollars. We also want to track those construction cost indices like the National Highway Construction Cost Index, the ADOT Construction Cost Index. And we also want to update a cash flow worksheet that's very detailed to see how just the anticipated revenues are performing. So we've got various tools that we're developing and that we've talked to the committee about so that we can make sure that we're informing the CART and the RTA board and the other committees on the financial health of the RTA so that if there are course corrections that are needed, we can anticipate those well in advance. So just wanted to add to that. And just to add to James's commentary about inflation adjustments, we also talked about using the GDP price deflator to make adjustments annually. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Chris?
That was a perfect segue into so we talked about the potential revenues, but one of the elements that we missed last time was the population growth. Was that factored differently in the new calculations for this? Because we'll miss that mark again. What was the anticipated population growth?
So if I may, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
so as Melanie was describing, a more pessimistic forecast was used as the basis for the revenue target, the 2.67. It was adjusted up to 2026 dollars. It was held constant at 2023 dollars based on the Eller economic forecast. The Eller economic forecast uses the most current official population forecasts, which are more conservative. And so I would say, to answer your question, the population forecasts are more conservative overall for those revenue forecasts.
Can you give some clarity on what difference between what it was previously to what the current forecast is now for the population growth?
I don't know if I have the numbers memorized, but I would say I think the forecast is about 0.5% growth annually across 30 years. So very minimal growth. Unless someone else has that number, we can also follow up with you, sir.
That'd be great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Anything else, Chris?
Chair, I know in the previous plan, the RTA sold bonds to finance projects. Has that also been factored into the RTA next, selling bonds to finance projects?
If I may, Mr. Chair, sir, a great question. So we do have in the administrative element, do have a line for debt service. And so that is contemplated as an option. So yes, but at this point, I mean, there's no specific plans for that, but there is the opportunity if needed. And I'm seeing others nodding in agreement. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Also, one more before Ruth. David, did you still have a question online? I saw your hand up earlier and then I think you put it down.
Yeah, the big thing I was gonna do is one question about the other rural areas. A lot of the improvements in the other rural areas like Green Valley are under safety improvements and will be funded as extra available funds come along. And that's usually normal that they did in the first 20 years.
All right, thank you. Ruth?
I have a couple of questions, and I want to start with the footnote you just mentioned, Rick, on the plan where it describes what you just read about plan revisions.
Correct.
I read that a little bit differently than your interpretation. I read it as there's no guardrails for the RTA board, that they can do what they want at their discretion and make changes at their discretion. I'm talking, I keep forgetting. Make changes at their discretion without community input, with nobody's input. That's how I read that footnote, and it scares me. It scares me a lot because they didn't go to the community in RTA 1 when they made changes. They made changes without any input. So how do we get guardrails on the RTA board? Anybody got an answer from anyone?
Thank you, Ruth, for that question, Mr. Chair. With that, this is specific to if there are insufficient funds. But with that, we still have to follow all applicable laws at the end of the day related to substantial change. So as Mr. Brown was mentioning, we're going to be tracking that regularly. And reporting on that to the CART and to the board in our committee process. And if we see a trend, at the end of the day, we may make adjustments to the plan. And if we see a very substantial downward trend that requires a substantial change, at that time, we would go through our committee structure to identify an amendment to the plan and go back out to the voters for substantial change. So that still needs to occur if that were to happen per the law, but this would give some flexibility there with that provision.
So if it doesn't happen, if you don't go to the public with a substantial change, the public doesn't have any recourse. The board is not elected by the voters. The board, there's no oversight accountability. There's no recourse over 20 years to hold them accountable. I'm concerned. That's my concern with all of it. So I'll leave that there because you've given me an answer and I can believe it or I don't believe it. So that's some feedback from me as a voter. But I do have some other questions. The plan looks really front-loaded. I've counted up like 26 projects in the first period, counting RTA 1 and the deferred projects. Where is the money going to come from in the first period to pay for 26 projects?
So if I may, Ruth, we do have a fund balance. We will have a fund balance projected at over $440 million at the end of FY26. Those dollars are committed to completing RTA 1 projects over the first period. So that's partly where the money is coming from. It is front loaded. You're right. It's very heavily front loaded because of RTA current and the deferred projects. The priority is to complete those projects in that first period or as close to the first period as we can.
So why don't you delay the new projects to period 2?
So Rick can speak more to this than I can, but there are some construction starts we're hoping toward the end of the first period. But as I see it currently, the focus and the priority of the first period is to complete the current RTA projects and the deferreds.
Okay.
Then I have a question on this presentation. The slide where you show the RTA money and the state and the federal money, it looks like you've taken a subset of the actual transportation dollars that come to this region to make a point. And I look at the long-range plan and your numbers don't match the long-range plan. They don't match actually the RTA next plan where there's funding sources that are not listed in your chart. So I'm concerned that you're misrepresenting the portion of our funding that is RTA money.
If I may, Mr. Chair, members of the CART, Ruth. So we've tried to be very careful with that slide to say that these are regional sources pulled by the PAG. So the HERF is the HERF 12-6 funds that come to PAG by statute, and the federal is the Surface Transportation Block Grant funds that come to PAG through suballocation by ADOT. It does not include all sources of transportation funds in the region, right?
No.
So a question was made earlier or asked earlier about HERF. So this is just the 12-6 we're showing, but there's direct HERF that goes to the county and the cities and towns, right? So that's not included. So we'll just need to be really careful when we're talking about this slide, just to talk about those regional fund sources that we have some control over at PAG RTA.
Okay, so having sat through this presentation 3 times now, you don't do that. You say all transportation dollars, and you say, then you compare it to my income at home, that I lose 2/3 of my income at home. That's not reality. That's not, you've got billions of dollars in transportation funding that you're not showing. So that money isn't 2/3, isn't relevant to my income at home because you took a subset of the denominator. So you're not representing it that way to the public. When I saw this presentation in January, it was, look at this, you have 2/3 of the funding is RTA money. And that's, when we lose that, you're going to suffer. So it was not clear at all when you do these presentations. I'm sorry. It's a misrepresentation of what is the actual data. Okay.
So some projects though are not RTA projects, yet they're still being funded through federal funds and other funds, correct?
No, they won't be for the next 5 years because it's all going to RTA projects.
The city or ADOT projects, there's ADOT projects out there that are not
Right,
RTA funded.
and that's funding coming to the region for transportation.
Right.
So that should be part of that calculation.
If I may add to that, so that's one of the features of the RTNX plan is that it does incorporate a large amount of federal dollars, what are called RAC, Regional Allocation Advisory Committee controlled dollars, and adds that to the plan. We leverage those dollars and say, these are the priorities for spending those dollars in our region to help fund those priorities. So without the RTNX plan, it would be up to ADOT to determine where those federal funds would be spent. We wouldn't have that control.
That's great. I don't question that. What I question is that those RAC dollars that you just mentioned aren't in that slide. And that's transportation funding coming to the region. That should be part of that slide. That's what I'm questioning. It's not that the money doesn't exist. It should be shown as transportation funding coming to our region to pay for roadways. So, and then there's all the transit money that's not in there. So it's just a really misleading slide. And I have issues with that.
Thank you for that comment.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, we can.
Hold on one second, Kelly. I'm just going to go to David again real quick.
Sure.
Right
I
on.
just wanted to make a comment about there's no accountability within the RTA board. I've found in my 20 years on this committee that they hold each other accountable. We had a discussion long ago about Oro Valley and some sound walls and how much they wanted to spend on them. And they made sure that they didn't spend too much on those. So I find that the RTA board is very accountable to the money.
To the money. Yeah, but not
And
to
the
the
project.
voters. I mean, that was the only thing this committee has done, truthfully. When,
We've done other stuff.
please, I'd love to see it.
Yeah.
I have yet to see any action taken by this committee.
Yeah, I think that's a.
Let me just
No,
kind of move on from this right here, just so we don't get into this right now. David online, do you have another question?
No, it's not a question. You were talking about guardrails for the problems. And if you go into the ASR Title 48 and read it about the special taxing districts, you'll find that there are a lot of guardrails on RTA. You just have to be aware of them.
All right, thank you, David. Was there anybody else that had any questions? I have one, and as I was waiting last on that. When it comes to the pavement rehabilitation part of it, it's for arterial and collectors. I understand that, and it's for all the regional partners in there. But there's not necessarily specific. It doesn't have to be RTA project. It just has to qualify as an arterial and collector, and then at that time it will be voted upon by PAG RTA board on potential distribution. Is that how it would work?
No, let me try this again. So there's a line item allocation, like all the other categories where candidate opportunities would be identified. So there's been a kind of an initial distribution that's been identified and it'll be included in the admin code. And so a jurisdiction then has to bring the appropriate candidate project, being on an arterial or collector. It doesn't have to be a prior RTA project. It can be a standalone roadway. And then the appropriate solution or treatment has to meet the performance criteria that was established for that category through the technical management committee. So there's certain, you just can't go out there and say, well, I want to do X, Y, Z. It has to have a longevity, it has to have a benefit, and it has to achieve certain performance requirements. So then that would be done and say, okay, that meets within it. We want to allocate that, meets within the aligned allocations that we have for availability of funding, and we would execute an IGA for it.
Okay, no, that does answer exactly where I was wanting to go. That's
Okay.
very, thank you.
You got it.
All right. Anna?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just to clarify, it's going to be similar to a call for projects. So we would, back in the day when we submit for sidewalk, something small, for a category, you do a call for projects for rehab of pavement, and the jurisdictions will.
I think it's a similar model. I think that's the envisioned setup is we'll have XYZ available according to the agreed upon allocations. Here, this is what you get. You can choose to, okay, we'll take our allocation and we'll bundle it with a future year in case so that we can get more product out of it. Or if there's an immediate need, we'll go forward with that. So similar to that.
Follow through all the committees like all the others.
Something like that. We haven't got exact all the prescribed means and methods of that, but very similar to that pattern that we utilized before.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. And David, again, you have your hand raised. Okay, all right, moving on. No other questions? Thank you very much, Melanie. Moving on to the annual report. Rick, Dan?
Did you want to cover the?
Actually, I did skip 5. I apologize. Looking at that. So the CART committee's structure, roles, responsibility, and reporting. Melanie, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem. And I know we're running low on time, so I can cover this quickly. But we did take the feedback from the previous meeting and looked at modifications to the structure of the CART committee, again, with the primary role being oversight, financial health, and program delivery, and then also aiding in the public process and helping with the public input prior to that 30% design milestone. So the structure handout is part of the packet here. And before I get into this process, I'll cover some of the structure based on the feedback from the last meeting. So we did present that to the RTA board, and their proposed structure is 15 members, 8 that are jurisdiction appointed, 7 at large, with 4 being the City of Tucson residents. And then the additional expertise requested was that someone have expertise in the area of transit. And then the process for the public input prior to 30% design is outlined on this handout here. So for each RTA project, the jurisdiction could decide whether they would like a separate public advisory committee. And then if that is the option that they go, it's kind of a decision tree here. If it's yes, then the committee would provide input and recommendations before that 30% design milestone, and then bring that to the CART committee, who would then present to the RTA board for review and approval. If a jurisdiction does not use a public advisory committee, the jurisdiction would still host 2 public open houses, provide input and recommendations again before the 30% design. Everything, no matter which decision, whether it's yes or no, would still come to the CART committee for concurrence of that 30% design, and then go to the RTA board for review and approval. And it would be part of the quarterly board updates as we discussed last time.
Thank you, Melanie. Do we have any questions? Dan?
Mr. Chair, if I may add just a little bit to that. Thank you, Melanie. Ultimately, we have a new commitment from our board and our executive director that we want to utilize this body, the CART, moving forward on a regular basis. And with that quarterly reporting, that's the opportunity that if this body has disagreements with staff, that's okay. We want that transparency and accountability coming out of this, unfiltered, going directly to the board moving forward. Our goal is to make sure that we are aligned and to provide you all with the information that you need and to answer your questions to make sure that what we're presenting to the board is aligned. But at the end of the day, if it's not, that's an opportunity for us to come back and make some changes moving forward. So we just want to make sure that you're aware of that. That is a commitment from our executive director and our board moving forward. And that's why we've made some revisions as part of our administrative code, which has been reviewed by our TMC policy subcommittee, TMC, and will be going forth to the board on December 4th to heighten the role of this body moving forward as part of accountability of the program.
Thank you. Bill?
Yeah, I'd like a little clarification, excuse me, on CART committee concurrence. Does that mean that the CART committee makes recommendations to the RTA board for moving forward with the 30% design? Or does it mean the CART committee has the power to not move forward with the 30% design?
So, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Bill, the authority for approval lies with the board. That hasn't been removed or changed. So we recognize there's still a recommendation, and that's where the concurrence comes from is, yes, the CART committee will have the ability to offer opinions, assessment, input, and recommendations for what the board should consider as action going forward. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thanks.
Got it.
Any other questions on the committee structure? Okay. All right. Moving on to the annual report. Rick, Dan?
Going as fast as I can on that. So this item is just simply a reminder that we have our annual report subcommittee that's targeted for December 17th, 2025 at noon, keeping with our Wednesday at noon request that you had identified in person. This is where we present the annual report to the officers prior to its publication that goes out in January. So this has been a standing item that's been in place for a long time. There was a request to make it available should other members wish to show up and come join in. It is targeted for the 3 officers to approve, but it's open now for anybody else that wants to be here as well. So just a reminder of that item that will be coming, and the information and materials will be sent out in advance.
Perfect.
Is that a Zoom meeting or in person?
Believe we're planning on in person. I'm going to double check. Yes, it's called for in person.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Rick. Moving on to future agenda items. Are there any items that the committee would like us to include moving forward?
What is our role moving forward? I mean, there's only 6 months left, so, or 7 technically. So what is our role?
Right now, our role is to kind of, I mean, I hate to say it, but my understanding is to continue forth as we have and trying to shape what the next, hopefully the RTA next does pass, and what the future RTA, the CART committee looks like. And that's part of what we were looking at, the committee structure, the roles and responsibilities, and what was outlined here. So we would like to say that the CART committee has more teeth to it. And so having the concurrence, in the design and having an ability to make those recommendations, where I think it may have been lacking in the first when we've done it that way. That's the goal over the next 6 months, is to make sure that we're looking for this, getting the RTA next pass and being able to have more of an active role with the board moving forward. Is that I think a fair assessment? Okay. Are there any other or any agenda items that people would like to see moving forward for the remainder? Andy?
I guess what I'd like to hear a little bit is how staff is going with presentations, what they've done over the next, past 3 months since this meeting, kind of gauging the reaction of the public and the attendance at the meetings would be important for us to know.
Yeah. Melanie?
Turned it off. Yeah, I pulled some numbers yesterday. Actually, we've presented to about 25 different groups since the plan was approved and tabled at 8 different community events. For the tabling at those events, we've had interactions with just around 700 people total. And then for the presentations, attendance has varied. There's no minimum attendance for a presentation. We'll go to small HOAs, we'll go to large groups. So we've just been getting out to as many groups as possible. Some of the common questions that we have gotten are around, just community safety, some transit questions, and, what exactly is funded by, what does transit mean? Is it just the bus? Is it more than that? So we've elaborated on Dial-A-Ride, just as we did with the presentation here. And then a lot of questions about the completion of the 2006 RTA. And, we've been reminding everybody that there is a plan for everything to get done. And then 7 RTA projects are rolled over into RTA Next. So those have been a lot of the common questions, and clarifying for people that this is not something new. As we discussed, it is a half-cent currently that we're paying, and it would be a half-cent going forward for the next 20 years. So that's been a key clarifying point for a lot of people in the public.
Yes, Anna?
Thank you. So just to piggyback on what Andy asked, so maybe next time is seeing what the public has asked, but maybe what is our plan? How are we going to answer the public for some of the questions? If they're asking for a whole new different project, if they're asking to change the scope of an existing project, if they're asking to remove a project, how are we providing that answer to those people so that everybody else can see it?
Yeah, so our website is the best place to go for a lot of that information, rtanext.com. And under the tab resources, there's a lot of fact sheets and great information for people to review. Also under the Get Involved tab are a series of upcoming dates and locations where we'll be providing public presentations with the Q&A session after as well. We have one tonight actually that's virtual. So there's a virtual and in-person presentations. And then in terms of project revision, the project list is set and adopted by the board. So the plan is the plan, and this is what will be on the ballot in March. And where people still have that opportunity to submit projects is for those other elements, the categorical funding, the safety, and those other elements. So that's actually a great point. This came up in Green Valley earlier this week, the discussion about a plan for the next 20 years that provides enough specificity to hold the board and everybody accountable to deliver projects, but a little bit of versatility to adapt to changing needs for the region, because it is a 20-year plan, and that's a long time to try to plan for.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Melanie.
Is the RTA, I believe that Mr. Ortega is the interim executive director. Is the RTA waiting for the vote to do a search for a permanent executive director?
I could answer that. The board did approve a revised contract for Mr. Ortega as our permanent executive director. So how long that continues is up to the board and Mr. Ortega. We hope to have him on for a long time, but he is committed to seeing this through, and that's why that change was made.
Great, that's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions, future agenda items? All right. Hearing none, I think, and I don't think anybody online has their hand up. Looking for adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn? All right. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon.
Thanks, everybody.